Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian from Whisper Status 74, and the topic of the video today is going to be the brand new 8K Samsung Q900 Q900R. The reason why I want to talk about this display is I just read the review on Rtings, went through the entire review, and for those of you new to the channel, this isn't a comprehensive review. I don't have a display here. The channel is more discussion based on what all of us as a collective, that's me, you in the comments, think about reviews and if we would purchase the display using our experience to whether we'll purchase it or not, or whether we recommend it to each other. So it's never just me here. The reason why I want to go over this display is a lot of us have been waiting for it for different reasons. Getting it out of the way first, it is the first 8K display released for customer purchase out of the big three. The big three being Samsung, Sony, and LG. I don't care at all about 8K. I'm going to say that right in the beginning of this. This is not why I want to do this video. Why I want to do this video is reading through the review. What I find disturbing, and it's a disturbing trend for LED, is, for me, is oversteering different concerns. Let's talk about quickly with LED what their big strength is: peak brightness, vibrancy, pop of picture, low cost in comparison to OLED. OLED's biggest strength is contrast ratio. It's deep blacks. It's beautiful image. It doesn't have the highest peak brightness, but because of its black level, the perceived contrast ratio is what makes the picture look so good. So contrast ratio being very important. LEDs, also viewing angle, very important to some people with OLED is viewing angle. As we know or we don't know, is off-angle viewing can change a great deal with LED, more so than LCD ever did. But LED, off angle, the colors will shift. Way off angle, you'll see blooming, you'll see edge-lit problems, you'll see banding, you'll see all kinds of stuff off angle. So it's important to some people. To me, it's not super important. The TV, 75 inches, I'm not sure where everyone's going to be sitting, but it all depends on where you sit. To some people, it's very important, especially if you have a smaller display in a larger room. Why I talk about viewing angle is, for some reason, LEDs between Samsung and Sony with the Z9F, their flagships have chosen to focus on viewing angle, and in turn have affected their contrast ratio and lowered their contrast ratio. Even with the latest Sony, which took place of the 900F, which has got a very good review, we'll do a video on that as well, they have also decrease their contrast ratio in replacement of a wider view angle. To me, that is a huge mistake. Simply because we want every generation to get better, to improve. And with the Z9D, good example, one of the greatest LCDs or LEDs ever made, was made in 2016. The flagship for Sony in 2017 was the Sony 940E, which was also excellent. Both of those displays have almost zero blooming. I had the 940E myself. I put it through tests. The blooming was so minimal, it wasn't even an issue. Especially considering that the TVs at the time had column blooming, especially the edge-lit displays of the time. The Z9D stayed kind of that pseudo flagship until the Z9F released. There's a reason the Z9F isn't as popular. This feature of creating a wider viewing angle, there is blooming that's more evident, and the black level is a little bit more gray. Now, any of us that had a Z9F would still be blown away by it. I'm sure it still looks amazing. But when you're talking about flagship, guys, we're talking about $10,000, $9,000. We want things to improve. You want the contrast ratio of the Z9F to be better than that of the 940E or the Z9D from years before. Kind of what I'm looking at with the Q9FN. Now, the Q9FN does have some blooming to it, but reading this article here, what they're talking about is minimal blooming, but a reverse blooming that comes off as a vignetting. However, it still looks like blooming. Doesn't matter if it's theoretical blooming or blooming, it looks like blooming. We're still seeing it as blooming. So for this display here to perhaps have more blooming than the Q9FN makes absolutely no sense to me. And I find that very challenging. These TVs are flagship, by the way. The prices are, the 82-inch is 10 grand. The 75-inch is in the $7,000 range, and $5,000, I think, for the 65-inch. I'm not sure exactly what the prices are. They're expensive. I know the 82 inch is almost $10,000. So this at the current time is their flagship. It's the first of the 8K line. But what I'm really interested in here is at this level. Now, quickly, this is from Rtings.com. I love their reviews. They're very comprehensive. They literally cover everything. Contrast ratio, local dimming. They also cover things that other channels do not. They cover other websites, I'm sorry. They cover gray uniformity. They cover dirty screen effects, screen uniformity, black level. They cover, and it's all done scientifically by numbers. But where I don't get caught up in the numbers, where I get caught up in is talking about now they buy independently. They buy their own displays. Is the amount of dirty screen effect they had on this display was enough for them to bring it up. That to me is disturbing for a flagship. Now we talk about TCL and Vizio and those displays having screen uniformity issues and DSC. I can't tell you the amount of Q900s that have been brought to my attention on the channel as having dirty screen effect, having terrible banding. They've had to bring them back. Some of you on the channel have had 4 or 5 of them, as well as every brand. So screen uniformity is an issue, especially at larger sizes. I believe they've tested the 55 inch. They tend to buy the smaller versions of them, obviously to save money. But to see that the contrast ratio, so we're going to do a couple... It has an ultra viewing angle optical layer that greatly improves viewing angles at the expense of contrast ratio, similar to what the X wide angle does to the Sony 9F. So that is a problem. So my thing is, when you're talking about improving the Z9D, which was far and away the best LED at the time, or the KS9800, what I'm thinking is more zones, higher peak brightness. The higher peak brightness should be past 2000 at this point to take advantage of Dolby Vision, even though the panels aren't 12-bit. Also, black level. The local dimming and the amount of zones go up as high as you need to eliminate blooming altogether. I mean, eradicate it so it doesn't exist. They've chosen to not stay there. They've chosen to go into viewing angle, thus creating other uniformity issues. Now, where they address reverse blooming, I'll read that to you because it does explain why so many people see blooming on the Quantum P series. Reverse blooming, we've seen this in the past on Vizio TVs, where the TV, in an effort to reduce blooming in the dark areas, dims the edges of the bright ones. This makes them end up with a vignette around them, which does look like blooming. Also, the TV greatly dims small, bright areas even more than the Q9FN. The TV crushes stars, which the Q9FN was criticized for crushing detail, a lot like OLED, losing the fine detail of the image. And the issue is, this needs to get better. These need to get better, not worse. Now, I'm sure it has its merits. The peak brightness doesn't exceed 2000 in any of their SDR peak brightness or their HDR peak brightness. The TV is very bright. It seems to be maybe on the level of the 930E of 2017. Now, peak brightness doesn't tell the whole story, but I think you should probably cover those things before you move on to viewing angle and oversteer, which is what I think they did here. They oversteered. Now, I'm going to do a separate video on chasing flagships and why sometimes your flagship is not even better than your mid-range in some areas. But I want to talk a little bit more about the grain uniformity and some of the other issues with DSC. For grain uniformity, it says it is decent. In the 50% gray image, there are several spots where the dirty screen effect is very evident. This might bother you when you watch anything with large areas of similar color, like a football field. Football field's a good example. A lot of us watch football, but anything in gaming is going to show that. Any skybox, any screen, anytime those of us that game, forget about football. It's about when you're looking at a third-person shooter or first-person shooter and you scan the sky. That's the same thing as looking at an ice rink or a football field. To have DSC at this level. Now, remember what we're talking about is this level. This is not a TCL 6 series that you grabbed at a Walmart or a Target or anything. This is their flagship. Now, screen uniformity issues are abound with larger displays. I think they reviewed a 55-inch, or I think it might be 65-inch, but it's still smaller than. So there goes the whole huge TV issues. They don't cherry pick them. This is the one they got. It has DSC, dirty screen effect, which apparently at this day and age is unavoidable. It can't be avoided, which is terrible because it's very noticeable for a lot of us, especially with gaming, or anything that's panning. Vignetting, artifacting, these are things, reverse blooming, these are things that didn't exist with the Z9D or with the KS9800 back then. So, in my opinion, they're not improving upon what came before. Eradicate the flaws of what came before. So, if you are somebody who had a Z9D or had a flagship, a lot of times it bothers you that the new technologies come out and is better. But if it's not better at the viewing angle, I mean, be better at the viewing angle, don't get me wrong, but not at the cost of your contrast ratio, which we'll talk about. The contrast ratio, this is where I'm mostly concerned. The native contrast ratio of the 900R, Q900R, is only decent, but the TV's great local dimming helps compensate for this, which can also create its own artifacting and blurring, or blooming. The native contrast ratio is far lower than most TVs with VA panels of any cost, not just another flagship. This is because of the TV's ultra viewing angle, which improves upon the viewing angles. This is very similar to what we observed with the Sony Z9F. Now, that doesn't say that it has a lot of the gray black bars that the Z9F tended to exhibit in a dark room. So what's interesting about bright room performance is the black bars are black due to the peak brightness in a light room. A lot of our TV watching is in dark rooms, especially us in the home theater community. Black bars at this level should not happen. 940E, again, the flagship of 2017, had almost no blooming at all, and the black bars were black. And it had its own dirty screen effect and things of that nature, but that TV should be improved upon with the Z9F. And that's what this whole concept of this video. I'm not reviewing or even knocking this display. The video is really not even a rant. It's just something that I find disturbing, is that with each, it's almost like a patch for a video game. Every time they patch something, they undo something else, or they oversteer. And this video is basically, go to Rtings, read their review. They don't just talk about picture quality. They break it down almost too much. And HD TV Test, Vincent is very analytical with his numbers. What I like about the way they break it down is what a lot of other people don't. They break them down as every separate category, and they do compare it to the TVs that came before it, namely the Q9FN. So it's not super bright. It doesn't blow the Q9FN out of the water in that regard. And it has this wide viewing angle. So this video is just primarily about that. It's basically saying that be mindful. If you were looking for a 4K TV, don't just aim to the highest end flagship of Samsung or Sony's line. You might find a better display, $2,000 cheaper or larger. You might be able to get a larger display of even better quality for what you're looking for. If you're telling me here that dirty screen effect is going to bother some people with sports, well, most people buy these things to watch sports. Kind of a big deal with screen uniformity. So I just don't understand why these companies do not figure out what's going on with their screen uniformity, dirty screen effect, banding, vertical banding. I don't know if that's just manufacturing practices or why this happens. It happens with OLED as well. They're not immune to screen uniformity issues and banding. So let's not pretend that LG's got that beat either. But to have this review, to read it, I mean, here's their plus. 8K resolution, cool, even though we have no 8K content. And again, the sell for these 8K displays is going to be upscaling. It's going to upscale your cable TV to 8K. Guys, we know that your cable resolution is probably 720p. We also know that upscaling at times can look even worse, as upscaling is not the same as downsampling. It doesn't necessarily clean things up the way it should. Sometimes it creates all kinds of noise, especially going from a 720p image to 75 inches. So the upscale, though I've read on other websites, is excellent on these TVs. I've yet to see upscaling with any of the OLEDs, the Z9D, that blows me away. I think 1080p TVs do 1080p better, especially 720p. My plasma upstairs looks better than my 4K display doing 720p content. So to say that 8K resolution, wide viewing angles, great for a VA panel, great local dimming and a darkroom performance, which is great, which is better than a Z9F. A lot of dirty screen effect is evident on the screen for a flagship. Now, quickly back to Rtings, where they do some comparisons. I do recommend you go and read this review. They say picture 1 shows stars being crushed. This is in comparison to the Q9FN. Picture 2 and 3 show black bars being dimmed on the 900R, but not on the Z9F. And finally, some more blooming into the black bars of the 900R. So blooming is the biggest knock on LEDs in comparison to OLEDs. Get rid of it. That's all I'm saying. That's what this whole video is about, is on these new displays, this flagship on a $7,000 TV or a $10,000 TV, it should be not just more than an incremental upgrade, it should be an upgrade. And I don't feel that between the Z9F and the new Samsung, from what I've seen in the few reviews that I've read, they have maybe taken a step back, which is fine if it's something small that you're buying it's inexpensive. These things are expensive, very expensive. I mean, you don't buy these every year. So the whole concept of this video is that I'm worried. I'm worried that LED in its quest for trying to beat OLED is doing it the wrong way. To me, in my personal opinion, high peak brightness, better blacks, and you win. I don't understand the viewing angle fascination with the Z9F and this new Samsung. So this video, I'm sorry it's long. It's not really as much a rant. Those of you that are familiar with the channel will understand my concern. Those of you that are new to the channel, I know this is not a review. It doesn't make much sense to you, but it's more of a discussion between those of us that love this hobby. I just know that many of you are waiting with bated breath for that new Samsung. It's 8K. Just be very aware of the marketing that they use with all these TVs. And I would now wait it out. I would wait to see what Samsung's next line underneath shows. It might be better than this one. So wait it out. Sony just released their newest successor to the 900F. It looks good. It also has a lower contrast ratio, which I don't understand, and it aggravates me. So that's my video on the Samsung. Check out the review on Rtings. Look for them, compare them. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know if this makes you nervous. For those of you that love LEDs, I love OLED picture quality. I am an LED fan. I love these displays huge, but I want, if I was to cash in my Sony 900E, I want the $10,000 TV I buy to blow it out of the water. I mean, eradicate it. I don't want it to be a little bit better. These TVs have been bought and paid for. With reviews like this, it makes me now want to aim back to those smaller companies. It makes me not want to deal with dirty screen effect on the highest end flagship. Now, that could be just their one model, but I'm hearing it in the comments from you guys with the Q9FN and the Sonys and the LGs. So please let me know in the comments what you think about this. Are you afraid of where LED is headed and that this has become their primary focus? And if you're looking forward to this display, some of you have already ordered this. Now, quickly before I get out of here, I want you guys to also understand that we're very particular here in terms of a lot of their numbers may not show up on screen. So if you're somebody who turns on your TV and just takes it for what it's worth, none of this is probably going to bother you. I'm sure the Z9F, if it was on our doorstep, or this display, we'd probably all be pretty blown away by it, but we kind of know better, and we do look into these things. It's the whole point of us having a channel and a community on it, and we're really particular. Mainly when we're watching our movies and little things catch our eye, whether it's banding or dirty screen effect. The panel lottery is legit. I know a lot of you say, well, hey, just deal with it, accept it. I cannot spend that much money on a TV and have a dirty spot right in the middle of the screen. It makes me crazy, especially when I'm trying to be immersed. So thank you guys as always. Let me know in the comments what you think. Again, if this is a TV that you're going to order, I'm not killing it. Please understand, I don't think it's a bad TV by any stretch, but I want to see it blow away the Q9FN. For a flagship, I want it to really be a step up. I don't want it to be a step back in any capacity. Contrast ratio being lower to me is a step back. And that alone is why I wouldn't purchase it over the Q9FN. All right, guys, thank you as always. I look for your comments, and take care.